All right. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's attending. My name is Jim Crispino. I'm the Senior Director of Developer Evangelism here at Genesys, and this is our monthly DevCast series. Today, I'm going to be talking about making the most of the Genesys Cloud Developer Center. So it's kind of just a general overview of the Developer Center. I based on questions that I get via email and via the developer forum and everything. I realize that not everybody knows how to make the most of the tools that we provide through our developer center. So I'm just going to kind of give you a tour. Hopefully you will see something. If you're a seasoned developer with Genesys, please don't tune out. There's probably some good nuggets of information I'm going to show today. Hopefully you'll learn something, and then for those of you who are new, you'll definitely know how to get started with the tools that we provide. So before we hop in with everything, I will try to keep 10 minutes at the end of this for Q&A. If you want to ask questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A widget. Open the Q&A widget and put your question in there. I will refer to that from time to time throughout the webinar and try to answer questions. Do not use the chat. I'm not going to be monitoring that. I don't have anybody sitting here monitoring the live chat. So please put your questions in the Q&A widget. And also, we're recording this. This will be on our community YouTube channel. And you can get to that through the Developer Center at developer.genesys.cloud/video. All right, with that, I am going to share my other screen. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Get out of that. Some of this around here. Get that out of the way, and we'll share this screen. All right. So hopefully you all can somebody give me a reaction? Make sure you can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up or something on the reactions if you can. All right, great. All right, so the Developer Center. We have the Developer Center at developer.genesys.cloud, which is what I just mentioned about the videos. So it is our single website worldwide for developer resources on Genesys. And when you go there, the main landing page, if you're like seasoned and used to it, you probably just click on something to get to the real content. But I do want to point out a few things on this screen. So these top level categories, these are quick links deep into certain things in the Dev Center. So we have an API Explorer. That is our tool to actually to read API documentation. All our APIs are there. And if you're logged in, you can actually execute those APIs in real time against your org and test out the APIs. So I'll show you that here in a bit. We have a section on developer tools. So we make a set of tools available to help you exercise certain functionality in Genesys Cloud so that you don't have to write code from scratch to play around with some of the features. So if you're trying chats or running queries against the analytics or doing something like that, then we have tools for that. We also have guides. So for those of you who are wanting to build a certain type of integration, we have guides that walk you through some of the really common integration points, just really quick single-page articles to get you started. And then a little bit higher level than guides are what we call blueprints. So blueprints are a richer set of a solution. It's kind of an end-to-end look on, okay, I want to build this kind of a solution. So it might have more than just API code. It might have some architect call flows and some data actions and kind of everything needed to make an end-to-end solution. So blueprints are just a little bit higher level than guides to give you some ideas on how to build certain things. If you're a development partner, if you're an ISV that you have a product that you want to integrate with Genesys, we have a section on the App Foundry. App Foundry is our marketplace. It's where third-party companies that have a product that is integrated with Genesys can put their product on the marketplace. But to put it on the marketplace, there's a little bit of development, a little bit of setup you have to do. So we have a section on that. The videos, that's the URL I talked about during the slides. That's we have several video categories. We've got dev drops, which are short little 10-minute videos. We've got the DevCast series here, which are a longer in-depth series, and a couple of other things. You can check out our videos there. We've got a blog where various people around Genesys who have a topic they want to discuss with the development community can write a blog about their component, or how to make use of a certain thing. It's not really a guide, it's not really a blueprint, it's just a developer talking to developers, but through a static page. And then lastly, we've got a forum, and the forum is where you can get questions answered. So it's run on Discourse, I think, is our server platform for that, and you can post questions in there, and our developer center moderators, our engineers, our product managers monitor that forum, and we try to answer questions as quickly as possible for you all. So, and then if you scroll on down, we even have more. So we've got some topics on various components within the API set that will help you get started, like learn how to authenticate, learn how to get authorization to make an API request. The platform is our platform API. It's our API for everything. If you're doing routing and conversation handling, there's some topics there. Analytics, if you're wanting to get data out of Genesys. So these topics are also available in the next screen, and I'll show you that here in a minute. We do have search. So obviously we have search here, but also at the top bar is search. And when you search, right, based on your filter criteria, there's a little filter. We added this, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. You can actually search both the Developer Center and the Resource Center. So the Resource Center is the Genesys Cloud user's manual, user's guide, if you will. It's how to configure things. It's how to set up call flows, how to add new users, how to set up routing, how to create a queue, right? It's all the user guide kind of stuff. But there are some good nuggets of information that if you're creating one of those end-to-end solutions and you need a call flow and some code and a data action and some other things to make an end-to-end solution, the Resource Center along with the Developer Center are good to get information from. So through this search, you can search both. If you just want a Dev Center article, you can come in here and remove that, and we'll just search the Dev Center for you. Within the Dev Center, you can uncheck and check certain documentation. And within the Resource Center, you can check and uncheck certain documentation. So we've tried to do an aggregated search across the two sites that you might need to have information from. Another one, I know there are some developers that are passionate about dark mode. So if you don't like the light mode, I need the light mode. My eyes just don't like dark mode for some reason. But if you like dark mode, you can toggle that on, and you can work in dark mode. And we'll remember that setting for you every time you come in. The last thing I want to show you on this main screen before we get to all the good stuff is the account selection. So this allows you to log into your org. So on another tab, on another browser, I am logged into my Genesys, my Genesys development org. So if I click Add Account, my org is on US East 1. So all of the regions that Genesys supports are here. Depending on where your development org or production org is hosted, you would need to select the right region. Mine's on US East 1. So when I pick that, since I'm already logged in, it's going to go out, it's going to see I'm logged in, and it's going to grab my authentication and automatically add me. If I wasn't logged in, it would redirect me to Genesys Cloud. I would enter my credentials, and it would bring me back to here. And now you can see I'm logged into my Genesys 4 org. And it does give you some information. So when you're logged into an org, you can see your user ID, you can see the org name and the org ID and the division. The user ID is really nice. You can see we've got some copy fields here. Like if you're making user requests against the user API, you can come in and get your user ID really easily and then call that API to get information about yourselves. So we make that available to you. There's also some privacy settings up here that you can turn on and off. You can add multiple accounts. So here I'm in my US East 1 org. I can also log into my US West org. So let me do that. So it's going to ask me to log in. Let me change that to Foundry. Log in. So if you have multiple orgs, you can have multiple accounts and switch between those orgs easily. So right now, the Genesys 4 account on US East 1 is selected. So anything I do in the Dev Center using the tools or the API Explorer is going to run against Genesys 4. But if I select this one, now I'm running against my US West org on App Foundry, and any tools or API requests I make will go against that org. So if you have multiple dev orgs or a dev and a production org, and you want to switch between those seamlessly, you can just add the accounts. And we do remember your accounts. So if I close down this browser and come back into the Developer Center, it will try and reconnect me to that account. And that way you don't have to add account each and every time you come to the Dev Center. All right. Let me see if there's a couple of questions asked there. So let me get those out of the way. So what do we have? Why would I have different buckets? I have API Analytics, Query Builder, and an Application Inspector. Is that based upon my org settings? That's from Team. Okay, Tammy. All right. She says I answered. Okay. All right. So I think all of those are answered. Let me mark those, get those out of the way. All right. Joy, you raised your hand. If you have a question, can you put it in the Q&A widget on Zoom, and I'll try and get that answered for you. All right. While we're waiting on that, let me go to the forum, because that's probably the first thing you should do if you're new to the Developer Center, is come in and get signed up on the forum. So if you go to the forum, there is a login. I already have an account, but if you don't have an account, you can sign up. You don't even need to be a Genesys customer. It's open to the public. Anybody, whether they're associated with your organization or maybe they're a contractor you've hired and they're doing some work for you, but they're using, your Genesys instance and the APIs, they can come in and register for an account. So come in here, create an account, get logged in, and then there's a couple of things here on the forum. There's announcements. So we try to post announcements here to keep the development community updated on what's going on. So if we're going to deprecate an API, or we've got new APIs released, or we're making changes to the way an API works, we're going to announce those here. You can get a feed of these announcements once you have an account. You can choose to get a daily feed or a weekly aggregated feed of things. You can subscribe to just one topic to get notified on that, or you can subscribe to all the forum topics. But announcements are pretty important to keep up on what's going on. So I would encourage you. We try not to pester you. So if you just want to get a weekly update of what's going on with the Genesys API, come in here and register for that. If you just have a general API question, the platform API is our general purpose platform API, right? It's the API for the platform. So it is obviously our most used. There's 4,000 questions asked and answered on there. We've got if you're doing something with web messaging, we've got a certain one for that. Webhooks, data actions. We've tried to categorize these. Even if you're an App Foundry, there's stuff for App Foundry down here. So post into the forum. If you're unsure, don't sweat it. Just post into, say, the platform API, and we'll see that and either move that to the right forum or answer your question as it is. So before you post a question, you might use the search, just search for a topic, analytics, right? Everybody wants to get data out of Genesys. So search and see what's been asked already. And it's possible somebody has already asked the question that you're wanting to ask, and there's already been an answer posted for it. So that way you don't have to wait, right? You don't have to ask a question and come back the next day and see if you got an answer, or wait on an email to come in about that answer. If it's already been asked and answered, you can get your answer and move on with your development. All right, so let's that's the forum. Like I said, I'd encourage you, go sign up, get that out of the way straight away, just so you can have access to that. So we've talked about the platform SDK. Let me go down to that. I mean, the platform API. So once you get into the developer center, once you get beyond that main landing page, this is your typical view. So we've got all those main topics that were at the second half of the screen. Those are all right here. They're just, instead of blocks, they're in a table of contents view. And the platform is kind of the starting point. You can go to an overview of that, or really the platform API overview is good. But the overview section itself on the platform will say, okay, I want to X, right? I want to authorize my app. I want to implement web chat. I want to maintain calling lists. Here are some common things that people want to do, and quick links to those common things. The platform API itself has an overview, and this gives you an idea of how the platform API works and what you have to do. So the first thing, Genesys is regional, right? All of our orgs are broken across different AWS regions. So the URLs that you use to log in to make API requests or to access the app are region specific. So you need to be aware of that. And then we've got topics on authorization and other things here. I would encourage you, if you're new to the platform API, read through all of these. Just take the time to read through them, because I guarantee you're going to learn some stuff. We've got tips and tricks that, as we see common questions asked on the forum and stuff, we come in and update the tips and tricks to give you some ideas on how to use the API better. We talk about our change management policy, breaking changes, non-breaking changes, API updates, etc. If you want to use Postman, we make it convenient for you to use Postman. You can export these collections and bring them into Postman if you want to do stuff outside of the Developer Center. We've got some quick start information here. Rate limits. So rate limits are really important. Genesys is a SaaS platform. Everybody is hitting the same platform in a region. And we have throttling that happens so that one customer cannot take over all the resources for the entire region. If you get rate limited, we talk about how to handle that, right? You're going to get a 429 error response back that tells you you've been throttled, and you need to wait a certain period of time before making more requests, because your request will not be answered if you keep pinging away. So we talk about how to handle that. We talk about the different response codes that you can get back and what they mean, because some tell you it's a permanent error. Nothing you do is going to get you past that error. Others are soft errors, like the 429, right? That's a too many requests at a time, and you just have to wait. It will fix itself, but you do have to wait. And then we talk about versioning, which we really haven't. The SDKs get versioned, but the overall API doesn't. So as I talk about that, the SDK. So the API is the REST API. That's the gets, the posts, the puts, the deletes. That's the API itself. And but we have SDK wrappers. Those are down in the tools. So if you go down to in the resources section to developer applications, and we have the platform client SDK. So we've built a wrapper around those raw API requests in most of the common languages, so that you can just simply make method requests, right? Call functions or methods or classes to facilitate calling the REST API. So we'll get down into that more, but I want to point out that we do have wrappers around that. We have a SDK documentation explorer that you can see how to use those if you want to use the JavaScript API. Here are the different classes and the methods in those classes that are available. All right. Let's see. Under the platform, we have an integrations topic. And if you look at not those, not that integrations guide, sorry, that's where I wanted to get. So we have a couple of different integration types that you might be interested in. There's API integrations, there's data integrations to synchronize data, and there's UI integrations where you want to embed a UI. And we talk about those. We talk about the different integration endpoints that you can use. And we even have a guide on if you're doing a UI integration, because those are special. UI integrations, there's a little more involved to those because those actually integrate with the user interface and can communicate with the user interface of Genesys Cloud. And so there's a little bit deeper discussion on that. And that discussion goes into client apps. So client apps are those embeddable user interfaces, and they can be embedded in up to 3 different locations currently. We have a little sidebar widget. We have a standalone kind of full screen view. And then we have what we call an interaction widget, which is an area like as an agent is handling a call or a chat or an email, we can iframe an integration over to the right while they're handling that. So UI integrations are really popular to enhance the handling of conversations or supervisory functions of Genesys. If you want to embed a third-party web app into Genesys, client apps are the way to do it. So there's a lot under the platform that you might want to take a look at. The kind of, I think, to point out about the platform itself is the embeddable framework. So if you're doing a CRM integration, if Genesys and our App Foundry partners have built integrations to most of the main CRM platforms you can think of. So rather than building, you might look at buying, right? You can go to the marketplace and somebody has probably already built the CRM integration for the CRM you're using. But if they haven't, if you need to build an integration to a CRM, to maybe a homegrown, maybe you guys have a homegrown system that you want to embed Genesys Cloud interaction handling into, the embeddable framework is the way to do that, and allows you to embed a small real estate user interface into Genesys Cloud. So that's the embeddable framework. We have analytics. Everybody, it seems like a lot of people want to get data out of Genesys Cloud, right? I realize contact centers are live and die based on reporting. So analytics is the way to get data out, and we have a ton of articles. So there's very in-depth discussions here about analytics. You start with the overview and then dig in. We've got different kinds of queries that you can run to get data out. Conversation aggregates, we've got queue aggregates, we've got, well, these are all the aggregate queries. We've got detail queries. So if you want to get the raw data out of Genesys and do your own aggregation, we've got observation queries for metrics. Everything is there, all the dimensions that you can query on, the metrics that are available if you're doing metric queries, etc. So that's a whole topic. We've covered that on some DevCasts. You can dig into that, so I'm not going to go over that in detail here. But analytics is a huge category. If you're doing stuff with media, with web-based media, web messaging, you want to bring in a channel, say Facebook Messenger or something. We've got a lot of pre-built, right? There's a lot of App Foundry partners that have brought in most of the channels that you can think of into Genesys Cloud, but maybe you've got a mobile app, you've got your own corporate mobile app that your customers use, and you want to build the ability to message into Genesys through that. digital messaging and engagement is the place to go for that. You can read about that topic. We've got web messaging, which is a pre-built web-based UI that you can embed on a website. You can also embed on a mobile device. There's ways to do that. And we have open messaging, which facilitates really any third-party channel. If you wanted to integrate an SMS vendor, you know, a direct messaging vendor like Facebook or Line or Viper or something like that, you could do that. And so each of these, we have, here's all the web messaging topics that we have. We have SDKs around that. If you're doing open messaging, we've got an API around that. So lots of discussions on that. Even our kind of legacy web chat is out here. If you're still using Genesys web chat, there are ways to make use of that as well. So it's digital messaging, and then mobile applications. So I don't do mobile much, but we do have a mobile SDK. Let's see. It's this one. Devices. Where did that open to? I got to look for that. Here it is. No, that's not exactly what I was thinking. We have that's different. So disregard that. Where did I see that? I should have bookmarked that. Well, shoot, let me look for Android. Oh, I'm embarrassing myself here, guys. We do have a mobile SDK available that'll allow you to develop for Android and iOS. And I just gotta find it. Wow. Well, okay, so apparently our search needs a little help. Coming out of loss. I'll find that later. So let's talk about, now that I've kind of shown you an overview of kind of where to find information, I'll talk about some of the tools we have available. So once you're in, okay, so the developer landing page is here, and you click on any of these and it takes you into this view. The API Explorer. So I clicked on API Explorer from the main page. This takes me in. I can look at every API request on the platform here. If I clear all, right, I have none, I've cleared everything. I'm just going to bring up the user API because I want to show you how that works. And I'm going to scroll down. I got to go down to API v2 users, and I want to go down to the one with the user ID. So here is, I want to just in general, not this specific API, but in general, there's a couple of things here that I want to point out. With any of these, you can copy a link to this API and send it to a colleague, and they can go right to this topic, right? So if you're chatting with somebody or posting a question on the forum about a question about an API that you're using, you can copy that link, put that in a chat, put that in a forum post, put that in an email, and somebody can get right back to this API. You can also copy it with data. So if you filled out this request with with parameters, you can copy it with the data, and we'll send that as well. If you're not logged in, you're going to be in what's called reading mode. Okay, so reading mode is static developer content. You can just read about the APIs. You can read about the parameters, and you can read about the responses that you get back. But you'll see here, execute request, we're in reading mode only. We can't execute this request. So I would have to turn off reading mode, and let me make sure this is my user account. So let me grab my user ID there and paste that into here. And I will expand on, let's expand on authorization. And I don't need anything else. So it's built this request. This is the request it's going to send. It's going to do this GET request, and it did expand on authorization, and I'm going to execute. And it's executing against my Genesys 4 org. Maybe. Let me reload. Oh, there it goes. Sorry. All right. So it executed that request. It came back with the JSON payload of my user account in my org on my US East org. And so I get that information. I get my general information, and then I expand it on authorization. So down here, I get the authorization property along with all the roles and permissions that are assigned to me on my org. So you can execute most requests in here, at least those that require a user context. There are some requests that can only be executed by a server context, and you'll get an error if you try to execute those, and it'll tell you that they can only be executed by a server client credentials grant OAuth client. And to execute those, you probably have to pop out to Postman or write some quick code in some language to exercise those. When you're running an API, all of our APIs have operation information. So if you expand that, let's talk about this for a minute. Every API request should tell you whether there are permissions required. So if your user would need those roles assigned, or your OAuth client would need those permissions assigned via a role to execute that API request, as well as there may be scopes required. So scopes are talked about in the platform documentation. If you read about scopes define what access your OAuth client would like access to make. That way you can restrict what APIs are accessible by OAuth client. So in this case, if you have an OAuth client defined, you need either the user scope or the user's read-only scope just to be able to perform the GET operation of GET API v2 users user ID. Also, there's rate limit information here. So how many, for this API, what's the rate per minute I can call this API at? So I can only make 180 requests per minute. That means I can only query 180 users per minute on this. So what is that, 3 per second? And then there's other rate limits as well. And yeah, so I often see questions posted about that. The operation information is collapsed by default because most people want to see the API request itself. So yeah, you have to go in here and proactively click on that to kind of get this information. So one thing I passed over was the authorization. So this resource requires an OAuth client. If you click on this link, we'll come back to that. We have a whole section on authorization. So we use OAuth. We use OAuth here at Genesys. It's a well-defined standard, and we have different OAuth grant types that we've implemented. Implicit grant and authorization code grant, those are kind of user-facing grant types. That means to authenticate, a user is going to have to put in their Genesys Cloud credentials, their username and password, in order to get an access token. If you're doing server-to-server kind of stuff, client credentials grant is the one to use. This is where headless server-side executable can make a single request and get an OAuth token back without a user involved. OAuth scopes are discussed here. So if you want more details on how the scopes work, you can read about scopes and redirect errors if you're using authorization code grant or implicit grant, how to do that. All right, I need to get moving here. So I showed you the API Explorer, which was right here. So this lets you exercise all our APIs. Some people like to use API Explorer just as itself. They don't want the area over here, and they don't want the area over here. They want the full screen real estate. So We have a second API Explorer view down in developer applications. So API Explorer is our kind of embedded view inside the Developer Center. API Explorer standalone allows you to open that same API Explorer, but it does it with a little bit different view. So you get your categories over here. And if you want to do stuff, say with conversations, you want to go get a conversation, you can do that. And you go down to where you can do conversation by API or by ID. Gosh, you gotta scroll a lot. Okay, there's a like get conversation by ID. It'll open it over here. And it just kind of, it's a different view. It's a different view of it. Same functionality. It all works the same. It's just a little bit different view because some people kind of like the full screen view of that. Along with the API Explorer, we have some other tools. Those are in the toolbox. So if you, well, let me show you this. So we were on, let me collapse the toolbox. So let me expand users, and we were looking at that API v2 users ID, right? Let's say I really like that API. That's one of my go-to APIs. I'm doing some development and I need to test that a lot. If I star that, that'll add that to my toolbox, and your toolbox is down here with the wrench icon. You can make this a little bigger, and I have this zoomed in for you all so that it's not an eye chart. Usually I have a little more screen real estate here, but your starred APIs are listed here in the toolbox. So you have kind of a quick way to get to some of the common APIs that you use without having to scroll through the thousands of APIs that we have. It's all still the same functionality, right? Even the same parameters that I filled out before are here. It's just we've starred them and made them easily accessible to you. Also, we have notifications. So let's if you're doing stuff with events, so Genesys has a notification API. You can get real-time events out of the system. Let me show you that. Let me go up to the notification API. We'll set up an event real quick. So I'll go to notification API, notifications, and available topics. And we'll go to users down here, a v2 user presence. Let me find that API v2 users presence. All right, to make this work, I need to add a channel. All right, it adds a channel. I'm going to paste my user ID in here because I want information about my presence, and I'm going to subscribe to that topic. Okay, so I've subscribed to that. That's now going to show up in the toolbox under as a topic that I've subscribed for, and I can check that. And now Genesys, this toolbox is listening to notification, or not notification, it's present events on my users. So let me go to my org. Let me log in here. Actually, I'm logged in, so just let it load. All right, there I am. So I logged in. I got an available event. So here, if I change to busy, I'm taking a nap. I get the busy event. I don't necessarily get the napping, but I get a busy. You don't get the subcategories. You just get the upper level categories on this one. But any event that we have in notifications and topics, you can get. You can use this tool. So this is just meant for you to be able to quickly subscribe to a topic and see the payload, so that then when you're over in, say, Visual Studio or whatever tooling you use to write your code, you can have an idea of what those events will look like and what the real data will look like. Not that you can't get that from the documentation, because if you go to the topic, you can see the event schema. Right, you can see what we're going to send to you in the event schema, but sometimes it's just helpful to kind of see what it's going to look like. What am I going to get back? So the topic, what's the topic going to look like, and what's the event payload going to look like? So, all right, so that's the toolbox, and then I think the last web tool I really want to show you is web chat and messaging. So if you're doing anything with messaging, usually if you define a web messaging deployment, you've got a snippet of code and you've got to paste that into a website. And changing a production website with your web team, I'm sure, is a chore. So we know that's hard. We've made a tool here so you can test web messaging right from here. So if I pick a deployment that I have, and I'm on Web Messenger, you can also do the legacy chat, web chats, but you do web messaging and you start a chat. Give it a second. All right, there's my chat. So here, it's basically like posting the web messaging snippet into a website. It just did it dynamically into a blank iframe. And I can start a web messaging session. And if I were to come over here and go online, I should get that interaction. Oh, I'm looping. I must have broken that. Here it is. Let's see. There we go. Max loop reached. All right. So that lets you test out web messaging. So we've tried to make it easy for you to exercise the APIs, test out web messaging, test out real-time notifications, kind of really use the platform. There's a few last things I want to show you here before I open it up for any questions. So platform API CLI. So not everybody's a developer. We recognize that, right? Some are IT administrators. They are really great at the command line. They can do some basic scripting. We have a tool called the Platform API CLI. That stands for Command Line Interface. And what this allows you to do is download a tool, the CLI from Genesys, and you can download that for Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and it allows you to execute from the command line API requests in a command line type interface. So here's an example of getting a list of all the queues. If you were to execute this from the command line, it would go, and because of the auto paginate, if you had more than one page of queues in a query, it will automatically keep requesting additional pages until it has the entire list of queues. And you can pipe that if you're at the command line and you're a command line scripter kind of person, you can pipe that output to a file and then process that file and do stuff with it. It's not a read-only. The command line interface is not read-only. You can do updates through the command line interface as well. So you can really write some powerful scripts at the command line to do work for you against your Genesys Cloud org, or if you've got to get data out of your org quickly, like into a CSV file and get that to one of the business units. The CLI is really powerful for that. It's great for those. We've had people do PowerShell. They use this in PowerShell a lot on Windows. You can use it on Bash and Linux. You can really do some awesome things. We've got some topics over here, transforming output to a CSV format. So we've kind of helped give you some ideas how to do filtering, etc. So you can read through that. On top of the CLI, we've got something that's kind of similar, but it's called CX's code. This allows you to define configuration items and use, if you're a real development shop, if you got a CI/CD pipeline, which allows you to push code to a repository and process it through something like Jenkins, then you can use CX's code to define your configuration of your contact center so that you can keep, say, a dev environment and a production environment in sync. So CX's code is super powerful for that. It's along the lines of the CLI, but a little like a step up, an order of magnitude step up in what it can do, and keep your environment in sync. All right, let's see. Archie is similar to, well, not really similar to CX's code. It's kind of call flows defined in configuration files. So this tool allows you to define a call flow in a YAML file and push it up into Architect. So you can define your flows through files instead of using Architect for that. It has certain use cases. I'd encourage you to read about Archie and see what's there. All right, I'm getting at the end of what I wanted to show you. There's kind of so much in here. Developer guides are these are some of those guides I talked about. They're kind of like quick hits on how to do certain things within Genesys that we see commonly done. You can look over that. A lot of these give you code, examples of how to get started using to do a certain kind of development integration that's common. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, we do a newsletter every month to keep you guys updated on things. So you can sign up, put your email address in there, and add yourself to the newsletter emailing list. And well, let's see. Here's our blog. So I talked about the blog. There's the blueprints, the announcements that we make. All of those are all down here in resources. So they're separate from the API documentation. The resources are kind of our tooling. I don't know why that's taken so long to load. So, all right, we've got about 10 minutes left. Let me get through some of the questions. Mike Fox asked that, said, it's awesome we have native Android and iOS SDK. Yeah, sorry, Mike, I couldn't find that, but do we have one for the Windows desktop? So we don't have a Windows SDK specifically, right? You would write a .NET Windows application. We do have an SDK wrapper for .NET. So if you look at this, you can pull down this library. You can bring that right into Visual Studio, and it creates classes that you can use. And if you use the Documentation Explorer and pick the .NET SDK, it'll show you how to get started with that. And then, let's say you want to work with conversations. There's a conversation. Wow, there's a lot. This one's really broken out. Let's scroll down this way. Conversations. I don't do a lot in .NET these days. That used to be my go-to language, and I don't do much with it now. So, the conversation API is here, and you can see what the parameters are. So there's an SDK for .NET so that you can write a Windows desktop application for that. All right, Roscoe, you said, is there any event that can be catched in web messaging if the client closes the page? I know when I try to reply as an agent, I get message can't be delivered. So I want to know if there's an event or something to know if client closes the page where they initiated web messaging. That's a good question. I get asked the other way. Customers want, integrators want to know when the agent has joined and left the web messaging conversation. There is a way to get that. I am not sure if there's a way with web messaging to be notified if the customer drops. So let's see. Digital messaging, web messaging. I don't believe there is. Web messaging is designed to be kind of an asynchronous, long-running conversation, not like chat used to be. So technically, I don't think there's a notification when the customer drops. That would be if you have an idea, you post that on our ideas portal, and they can consider that for a future enhancement request for web messaging. I agree that would be useful so that the agent knows that the customer's left and isn't there. So why tie up the agent's time anymore? So you might post an idea about that. Is there a webinar or beyond training just for CX's code? That's from Ross King. Yeah, Ross. Genesys PS. So you could you can engage Genesys PS, and they can help you with your CX's code work. They can either develop for you or kind of be available to answer questions for you through an engagement. We do have some webinars. So if I go to the videos link and go into DevCast, John Carnell, CX as code. John Carnell did a great one on CX as code. That's going to load. I don't really want to watch that video right now, but go out to the video section and look for that. I think he's also done, go back down to videos. I think he's done some dev drops. He's done a series of dev drops on that. So dev drops are those kind of shorter ones. He's done a lot on CX's code as dev drops. So he likes to do small little nuggets of CX's code instead of one big long CX's code webinar. So I would go out to there, and I don't believe we have any beyond training specifically for CX's code. So it's kind of it's an in-depth topic, and I don't think the Beyond team has really developed any training for that yet. All right. Thanks for elaborating. Okay. I think that's all the questions. If you have any other questions, post them in there. We got a couple of minutes. I might see. I'm going to try that mobile SDK. I want to find that because I saw it earlier when I was going through what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and I should have marked it down because, like I said, I don't do mobile development myself, and I know that we have those. Let's just, okay, it's not analytics, it's not authorization, not billing, communication journey, digital, it's not messaging, it's not GDPR, it's not notifications, it's not organization, that's mobile device, that's different. It's not routing, it's not telephony. Is it down here in tooling, platform client SDKs? Yes, chat, share, tools, CX's code. Wow, I know I saw it. Well, there's an SDK for iOS and there's an SDK for Java. I guess Java could be used for Android, but I swore we had a mobile SDK. Maybe it is up. I know where I saw it. It was up in web messaging. Okay, there was a mobile so all right. So with web messenger, if you're doing web messenger on a mobile app, right, you want the customer on their mobile device wants to interact with your contact center, and you make it available that they can do a web messaging session with you through the mobile app. We have an SDK. That's what I saw earlier. That'll help you do that. So you can get started with that. Looks like maybe it's Android only, which is interesting. Doesn't mean you can't do iOS development because you could use the raw APIs for that, but it looks like maybe it's Android only at this point. So, all right, well, that solved that. Haven't seen any other questions come in, so maybe we'll wrap it up here. We're almost at the top of the hour anyway. Like I said, if you have any other questions beyond this, I showed you how to use the forum. Please post in the forum. We'll get those answered for you there. And with that, I will wrap up and thank you for joining. We'll see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.